You're listening to Northwood Church Matters, a podcast of Northwood Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. Hey, welcome back to the Northwood Church Matters podcast. I am here with Ivan McDonald.
Hey, guys.
And I'm here with Kerry Bochting.
Hello, world.
And tonight we're going to talk about, I think, an issue that is just really critical in the church today. In counseling ministry, we see a lot of addiction to pornography right now. And so it's definitely a series where I wanted to cover a lot of ground on different issues related to this. And today we're going to hit the basics. I will say that if you have small children at home, this probably isn't the best thing for them to listen to. We're not going to get graphic or weird, but we are talking about something sexual in nature. So use earmuffs wisely with your children. So why don't we get into it and just have a discussion generally on porn in the church?
Yeah. So you want to define it for us? What is pornography?
Yeah, this may be one of the most difficult questions, actually, which is, so I can get a working definition from Merriam-Webster, which I don't know whether I agree with or not, but Webster says the depiction of erotic behavior, as in pictures or writing, intended to cause sexual excitement. I think the most important part of that definition is the sexual excitement part. But really, the medium is the eye of the beholder, which is one reason why it's difficult to define, is that pornography, or what is exciting to somebody, can vary to person. Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart once famously said in a court case, "Pornography, I know it when I see it." That he couldn't really define it other than that. What is sexually arousing to one person is not necessarily sexually arousing to another person. An example is like on Instagram workout videos. There's some of those are intentionally alluring in terms of what women are wearing. And for some people that is addictive, enslaving, and some people that's just kind of like pass by that type of material. But also kind of as a pastor, I don't want to closely define what pornography is or like be legalistic or to say, this is pornography. If you're in this box, you're out of bounds. And if you're outside of this box, you're safe. For example, if I say full frontal nudity is the definition of what pornography is, then someone could come back in the congregation and say, well, I didn't watch a nude woman. I watched somebody that was being overly flamboyant and it was very prurient, but I didn't cross over the line. Are you engaging in lustful activity, as the Bible would say? Are you engaging in activity that's outside of the bounds of God's intent for sexuality? That's what we're going for there.
So how's the internet impacted this porn usage over the years?
So I'll give an answer, then I'll be interested in what you guys have to say because you're both IT nerds. I use that lovingly.
Oh, I embrace it.
Nerd
lovingly.
is a term of affection.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
So I remember just old school stuff, right? Like I grew up in the 80s. And so I remember pornography during that time. It's magazines like Playboy magazine, or in the era of Blockbuster Video, they all had a back room where you could go to the back room. And if you were an adult, you could go grab an adult movie and then go to the counter and check it out. With both of those things, in any sort of pornography during that time, there's a shame factor associated with that. Like if you wanted to buy a pornographic magazine at 7-Eleven, they're all behind the counter with black bars over them, so you can't see them, and you have to like ask a store person for a copy of it. And the same thing goes with pornographic videos at Blockbuster. If you wanted to check out a pornographic video, you got to hand the video to the little 16-year-old checkout girl, and then it says, "This is what I want to check out." And everybody in the line behind you gets to know that you're a pervert. And so there's some self-shame type factor that's in there. But the internet has kind of revolutionized pornography from a bunch of different perspectives. There's an estimate right now that 12% of the internet is pornography.
I would have guessed actually higher.
I would have too. I guess pre-Facebook, it might have been higher. You know, you think about like Facebook or Instagram just taking up such a wide swath now. But anyway, yeah, I would have thought it would have been higher too.
Yeah. And it could be higher. That may be just sites that are intentionally like, this is what this particular site is for.
Right, yeah.
But you're right. If you count like YouTube or Facebook or
TikTok,
Instagram, TikTok, all those things, it's probably much, much higher. A couple ways that the internet has revolutionized pornography. One is just the ease of access. You got smartphones now. You've essentially got a computer in your pocket and then high-speed internet. Like, you have the ability to download entire videos and play them at a very quick and rapid rate. And so just ease of access. We've eliminated the shame factor with pornography because you can download stuff in perceived anonymity. I think that people think that there's a lot more anonymity to porn use than there is in actuality. You have an IP address and lots of things that are riding along.
Oh, yeah. But I guess in the sense of still being a closet sin,
Yeah.
it's removed in that aspect.
Yeah. I'm doing it in my own home, and then people aren't really perceiving exactly what I'm doing. There's the ease of sharing materials because of social media. People can share a link, or kids can share their favorite stuff with each other over social media. But then there's also the ease of earning money. The revenue of the porn industry in the U.S. is estimated to be $1.5 billion, which is the same as the NCAA right now. And so that's a lot of money. And so you can see there's a reason why so many people are flocking to OnlyFans or starting amateur porn sites, because there's just a lot of money in it, because guys are willing to give up a lot of their hard-earned income for this type of thing. And women as well, but mainly men.
So, Matt, you brought up the financial aspect. So in college, we had a professor that was in like the computer maintenance class. And so that class was over taking a computer apart and rebuilding printers and stuff like that. And one of the stats he shared over this topic was, and this predates me slightly, you guys probably would know this better, but so back in the day, we had the VHS tapes and then we had DVDs. Mm-hmm. And at the end of DVDs, there was a fork in the road at the next media they were going to use. It was either going to be Blu-ray
or HD.
Yes, and most people have never even heard of it, HD DVD, okay? I had never heard of it until he said this.
Yes.
The entire reason Blu-ray won was the adult porn industry went Blu-ray, because Blu-ray had slightly higher data capacity and better imaging and whatever, but that actually set the standard for the entire media platform, was the adult industry.
That's true.
So that shows how big that industry is. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, that story is 100% true. There are two competing formats of media.
Right,
and then the one that won out was because of that. You see sort of seismic changes that happen on the internet too, like the advent of Pornhub. It came about around the same time as YouTube, and the way that kind of revolutionized everything as well, that it got even easier to access porn because it's all on this one giant streaming service. And now we've had another paradigm shift with things going from Pornhub to OnlyFans, which is more of a, what is it called? Patreon or Patreon.
Yeah.
With more of a Patreon type service where you're actually paying somebody for services. And there's a lot of ladies that are out there and guys that are earning buku cash by having subscriptions to their sites, and people are paying for certain content and asking women to do certain things. And what a weird landscape and time it is right now.
The flesh will always seek out the flesh.
Yeah.
I think, like, certainly media has ramped it to the nth degree. But even think about, like, when I was in junior high and first start of high school, before the internet was quite as accessible as it is now, just about everybody I know of knew somebody that, oh, they're under so-and-so's dad's mattress, or there's a DVD here. And it was, you had to go seek it out a little bit, but it was still so dang highly accessible.
Yeah.
And media has just taken it to, like I said, just to the nth degree.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the big change is the lack of shame factor.
Yeah.
That it's so private and anonymous right now that people feel like they can access it with no implications whatsoever. And we'll talk about this later, that I think statistics show that the majority of Americans don't even think it's bad. There's not any sort of negative connotation with porn usage anymore. It's just become the fact of the world that we live in, which is crazy to me.
How bad of a problem is this in the church, Matt?
I think that this is a huge problem in the church. I was talking to my daughter before coming over here, and she asked me about what my podcast was on. And I said, pornography. And I said, it's a huge problem in the church. And she's like, really? And statistically wise, there's almost as high of an incidence of porn use outside of the church as in the church. There's a difference, but it's not like a massive difference that's there. I would hesitate to say that most millennial and Gen Z guys have some sort of serious history with pornography because it's just a part of the way they've grown up. So the stats I'm going to give you are from a Barna research survey from 2016. So the views of pornography have changed as the first smartphone generation has grown into adulthood. So there's a real generational divide. The people that grew up with magazines and VHS tapes and even DVDs is different than the younger generation growing up. So young adults is the highest group of porn users and feel almost no guilt about porn use. Only 14% of teenagers believe that porn is bad for society. And then young adults ranked recycling as more immoral than pornography, or lack of recycling. Yeah. The lack of recycling as more immoral than pornography.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for most guys, most of the younger generation, it's just a fact of life. There's also a moral ambiguity towards porn in popular culture. So only a third of young adults 13 to 24 say that viewing porn is wrong. And only 1 in 10 teens have talked about porn in a disapproving way with their friends. In fact, most young people have a neutral view about pornography, and I think that attitude is invading the church. The key difference is practicing Christians versus non-practicing Christians. There is a difference in people that say, I am a Christian, but they don't practice Christianity versus those of us that are involved in church and discipleship. There's a shift that happens there, which is a good shift. So 26% of non-Christians said that they never have used porn. 37% of non-practicing Christians said that they have never used porn. And then 43% of practicing Christians said that they have never used porn. So there's a difference. It's not like a radical difference. And there's always the question about, are these real numbers? If you do a survey on a secret sin, are people going to actually say yes? And so there's always questions about whether statistical numbers about pornography are real. One other disturbing trend is the growing number of women that use pornography. 2024 Barna survey said that 44% of women access porn or have access porn, especially the younger generation. It's so much higher. And so porn use is definitely growing among the young generation of women as well, which is highly disturbing. So lock up your daughters.
Speaking of daughters, so my oldest is 10 and a half, and we recently found out at school that some other porn had entered their lives.
Yeah.
And so we had to have a discussion with my daughter about what it is and should this ever present itself at school, like minimum tell us, but we need to tell somebody what's going on type thing. And I don't know. I wasn't ready for that at 10, but
I'll ask a question about that. So did most of the girls that were involved in that have a phone?
There was only 2 that I knew about. And in both of those cases, yes.
Yeah. Because most girls nowadays, and I think most teenagers nowadays, it's getting younger and younger. I mean,
yeah. And so both of those, they're either, I don't know, somewhere between 9 and 11. And yes, they had phones.
Yeah. Which is the first age that a lot of kids get phones, which I've said this in a podcast before, but that's just, I would never give a child that young, like complete unfettered access to the internet.
Oh, yeah. Sure. A Motorola flip phone is one thing, but a full access iPhone is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with no restrictions. You just kind of say, here, have at it. And your kid joins TikTok and Instagram and
not even in a dirty route, but Kerry, how many hours can you spend on YouTube and then you find yourself on a video watching, and not even bad, but you just how things lead to each other.
Absolutely.
And the next thing you know, you're watching something. It's just crazy.
We're Christian parents and we gave our daughter a phone late in life, but that doesn't mean that when your kid goes to school that other kids do. And they're introducing your child to other stuff that they've seen on the internet and swapping stuff or sharing stuff. And there's even the questionability of, it's often mandatory for schools to give their child a laptop, a school provided laptop. And there's all sorts of filters and there's all sorts of alerts and things like a lot of the assistant principals in the area, like they'll get an alert if somebody accesses something they shouldn't have. The problem with filters and the problem with a lot of things is that people know how to get around filters. Yeah. No filter is perfect.
Yeah. It's usually not 2 days after school starts and my daughter's telling us about how people have already circumvented and have already installed their own applications on the device. And so Yeah, if a fence can be built, there's a way around it.
Yeah. That's a good way to say that. Yeah.
What does the Bible say about pornography?
So a couple things just to start out with. One is that God has created sexuality. So in Genesis 1, it talks about God has created human genitals, that he created the male and female, meaning that they're, in terms of sexual organs, that those are created by God and meant to be good. So that goes to a lot of the gender war stuff that's out there right now in terms of gender identity. God created both genders to be good, and we're supposed to be excited about the way that God has made us. Then God has created the act of sex itself, that if God wanted us to be like amoebas and reproduce that way, we probably could have in the imagination of God, but he didn't design that. And God designed sexuality to be relational between a man and a woman to give us another relational aspect with another person. And then God designed sex to be good. Everything before the fall, God declared to be good. And then people and sexuality, God actually declared it to be very good. And so in that way, Christians, we should be the most sex positive people that are out there. I know that there's a whole movement in the porn industry about sex positivity, that we shouldn't have a negative prurient view of sex. But I think that we as Christians can be the most sex positive people that are out there, because if we're doing sex in the context of marriage, the way that God intended, great thing. And we should just be encouraging of that in the church, that if you enjoy sex with your wife, fantastic. That's a great thing, and that's a positive thing. God intended it to be good. But we also believe that lust and masturbation are perversions of God's good gifts of sex, especially on a relational level. That what does pornography say? Pornography says that sex is about me selfishly feeling good. It's not about us together creating a child, or us together creating relational intimacy, or me as a sexual partner providing pleasure to my spouse. It's a selfish conception of sex. There's none of the relational stuff that's there. It's just about me feeling good. And we see that this goes into the sexual relationship of porn users, that sex becomes not a relational thing, but how can you serve me type of thing, or how can I serve myself type of thing. Porn also allows you to lust after a woman who's not your own wife. And so that's a perversion as well. God wants us to be sexually attracted to our wives. That's a good thing. God wants us to have relational intimacy with our wife. That's a good thing. And we shouldn't covet somebody else's wife. We shouldn't covet some other young lady that's out there. We should have a sexual appreciation for our own wives, for lack of a better term. And then the third thing that I'll bring up is that I think this is not thought of, but I think this is equally as important, that lust and masturbation are perversions of the imago Dei, or the image of God. That the pornography industry and users treat people as subhuman or dehumanized people, meaning you're just watching something on a screen and you don't think about, this is a real person. These people that are in porn scenes, they're acting. That's why they're called porn actors or actresses. They're acting out a scene. This is not how they feel about that. And they just become somebody that's on a screen, and you're not thinking about the real person behind the scene. They're just there for your pleasure. There's a kind of a decent slogan that people say that that's somebody's daughter on the screen. But an even better slogan for the Christian is, that's someone who God created and someone that Christ died for. And so it's hard to lust after somebody and thinking about them as God intended them to be. A couple kind of subpoints there is there's a lot of issues regarding mental health and well-being of adult performers that are out there. It's statistically proven that people that are in the adult industry have worse mental health issues like depression. A few years ago, there was a string of high-profile suicides among the adult industry of women that committed suicide within a couple years. I think it was 11 or 12 adult performers had committed suicide, and a lot of call for change based on that. Those people that are actors or actresses in adult videos aren't having the time of their lives. There's a lot of young ladies who have been abused or are in an abusive situation, or are being forced to do what they do, or they have to do copious amounts of drugs or alcohol in order to perform the way that they're performing. It's not the most exciting thing for people to do. It's not glamorous. It is demeaning And that's why there's a lot of mental health stuff. The last thing I'll say here is there's also a lot of issues regarding sex trafficking in the adult industry as well, especially during the era of Pornhub, where you could essentially upload anything that you want to a streaming site. And there was a lot of that type of stuff that's happening. The biggest example of that was a scandal with a company which was convicted of sex trafficking. A young lady flew somewhere. This company had paid for it, and it was supposed to be a modeling job, maybe some limited nudity or something like that. And she arrived at the airport. Some guys picked her up. They locked her in a car, then drove her to a hotel, then locked her in the hotel room. And they said, unless you commit various acts, then you're not going to leave this room. But that's normally what we think of in terms of sex trafficking. But most sex trafficking occurs with husbands and also with family members, that people for financial gain will force their children or their spouse into performing on video or camera in order to get profit or money from it. And that's the majority of sex trafficking that's really out there. It's not stranger type of sex trafficking. It's somebody I know is trafficking me into sex. And fortunately, that's the one area of the porn industry that I think the government has really taken a crack on, especially with the Pornhub things. There's a lot of push against Pornhub right now because of the amount of sex trafficking that was occurring on there.
I can't imagine that's an easy political thing, especially when you get into like where do servers lie and all that mess. But
yeah, whether they're in the US or
correct
other places.
Yeah.
I think the way that Indiana is getting after it is that they're requiring a lot of these streaming sites and porn sites to collect like your driver's license information if you access pornography or some of your contact information. And that lack of anonymity or breaking the wall of anonymity is forcing some guys not to use those services.
So why do people seek this out, Matt?
The simple answer is that we seek it out because we're sinners. We want sexual gratification without the relational aspect. We want sexual gratification without the holiness aspect. And so it's just like any of God's good gifts. You could pervert any of God's good gifts to your own selfishness. This is just an example of that. Of course, lust is always a factor. The Bible says in the Sermon on the Mount that when we lust after somebody in our heart, it's just as if we've committed adultery. We're coveting something that does not belong to us. We're thinking about the act and we're engaging mentally in the act. And lust is always a factor. And I think often we don't understand that both genders have sexual desires, that women have sexual desires as well. And guys have sexual desires, of course, but pornography helps people fulfill that sexual desire. And whether it's somebody that's single or is in a difficult relationship, or there's a relationship where the sex life is strained, there's often people that are trying to seek sexual gratification and they can't achieve it in their own personal life. Another big reason is escapism of some sort, where work is stressful, home is difficult, your sex life is not what you expect, and people are just trying to escape reality in order to get loose from whatever ails them.
And I believe there is a dopamine
Yeah.
hit from it as well. So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Speaking of God's good gifts of sex, is that there's a reason why that dopamine hit is there, that God intended the orgasm to be pleasurable, that this is God saying this act of sex that you're doing with your spouse, that's a good thing. But when you're getting that dopamine hit apart from that, that's when that becomes not the way that God intended. God intended that euphoria or that high to be with the person that you're with, that you're sharing in that experience. It's a bonding to go through that together. And another reason that's out there, why do women use pornography? Sometimes it's dudes that are pushing their spouses or their girlfriends in order to get involved in it, which I see more than I would like to in counseling. That guys just think it's normal. They force wives to get involved in it and try to imitate acts that are on film. And that's often traumatizing for the women that are involved in that.
Is pornography use an addiction?
This is a tricky question as well. Deepak Riju, he's a Christian and he writes about pornography a lot. It's kind of his area of specialty. He calls pornography use voluntary slavery. And I think that's a good term for it. Voluntary meaning that initially we make this volitional choice to use it in the early type of stages, that there has to be I'm going to do this type of thing. We don't stumble into it. There's a choice that we make. And then slavery, that eventually our volitional choices lead to bondage to our sin, like they hold mastery over us. And this is a very Paul thing to say from Scripture, that if we are lost, we are under the bondage of sin. Like sin is our master. And then Christ comes and rescues us, and then we become slaves to Christ. We become servants of Christ, that we've been bought with a price and now we belong to Christ. But even though we belong to Christ, there's a principle that we can become enslaved and ensnared by sin, that it holds this huge mastery over us. Now, that principle doesn't say that there's not anything physiological going on, but I think the term addiction is often a leading term because it's so associated with modern psychology, that psychology tends to argue that a lot of things that happen in our life is just physiological stuff, the dopamine hit type thing. And so if we're addicted, then that means that we're ensnared in this purely physiological thing, and then we keep seeking it like the mouse is trying to get a high over and over again. And it's just this completely physiological thing, and we have no volitional choice about it. And I really don't like any suggestion that there's not volitional choice involved with pornography use, because there is. With any addiction or so-called addiction, there is a volitional choice that's there. We can't get to the point of describing this where somebody can legitimately say, I just can't help it. The devil made me do it. This is just my body. I'm following my body. I can't help myself. And I'm just a person trapped in a human shell. There is a powerful physiological aspect of pornography, but it doesn't control us. Christ came to set us free. And I think what's positive about the term voluntary slavery is that it's not an addiction, because Christ can come and he can rescue our minds, rescue our hearts, change our lives, and we are no longer slaves to sin. We can live for Christ and we're free and enabled. And so he changes the choices that we make, that we have a greater affection for Christ and a lessening affection for the things of the world. And he changes our heart. He changes our desires. And it's not like we're trapped in our bodies, enslaved to things. There has to be the choice aspect that's there. Thanks for tuning in to the Northwood Church Matters podcast. If you'd like to find out more about Northwood Church, you can visit us at our website, www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org.